Okay, we're connected.
Good evening. I'm Richard Nobles, and I serve as chair of the Licensed Psychology Advisory Committee of the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. And I ask the members of the advisory committee to respond to a roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that is being conducted remotely by a conference call and other electronic medium. Linda Heitzman-Powell. Has Linda, I can't see.
I'm here. I'm
Okay.
here, Richard.
All right. Thank you, Linda.
You're
David
welcome.
Stevens. Abby Callis.
Here, sorry.
Oh, no,
Yes,
you're
I'm
fine.
here as well. Abby's here also.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Mark Goodman,
I'm here.
Matthew Golker,
Present.
Jessica Hamilton will not be here this evening. Edward Hunter, I don't see Ned. Tiffany Johnson,
Here.
Sarah Kirk,
Here.
Chris Leonard,
Here.
Jay Middleton,
Here.
and Doug Wright will not be with us this evening. And I recognize that Edward Hunter has joined the meeting. So I note the following staff members are also present: David Fye, Executive Director, and Leslie Allen, Associate Director.
I'm here.
Next, David Fye will read a message concerning being held remotely.
Thank you, Richard. This is David Fye, Executive Director for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. Public comment allows the advisory committee to address any concerns from the public, but the Kansas Open Meeting or the Kansas Open Meetings Act, the KOMA, does not require the advisory committee to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Individuals requesting to provide public comment could contact the executive director prior to the meeting by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov. There will be no time for public comment as no individuals requested time for public comment. Because we are conducting this public meeting remotely by conference call and other teleconference ability, I state for the record the following information. Access to this meeting is being conducted by medium of interactive communication that allows members of the public without cost to attend the meeting through the use of the conference call and on the board's YouTube channel. While the meeting is conducted remotely, the requirements of the KOMA are not suspended. Therefore, we will be conducting this meeting pursuant to the KOMA. On May 12th, 2025, we sent notice to the advisory committee meeting to all individuals who have requested notice of such meetings. The notice was also posted on the board's website, ksbsrb.ks.gov. You may obtain a copy of the notice at that website. An agenda and other meeting material have been posted on the board's website and are available for review. You may also request a copy of the agenda specifically by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov with the subject line request for the agenda, and it will be sent to you. The notice contains information for the conference call and YouTube channel that allows members of the public to attend the meeting free of charge. The notice also states that if we have any technical issues during the meeting, you may contact the board office by sending an email to bsrb@ks.gov. A recording of the meeting will be available on the BSRB YouTube channel following the conclusion of the meeting by using the link to the meeting on the agenda. And our conference call line is active. I have not heard anyone beep over into the meeting, but if I do hear someone announce themselves, I will let you know.
Thank you, David. And with that being said, the meeting is now called to order and the advisory committee will begin its discussion of the first item on the agenda, and that is to approve the agenda for this evening. Any questions about what's on the agenda? All right, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
I approve the agenda.
Mark moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Christopher Leonard, second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. The motion passes. So I'll move us on to the next item of the agenda, and that's a review and approval of the minutes from the last advisory committee meeting. Everyone received a copy of the minutes previous to today's meeting, and I want to know if there are any revisions that need to be made to the agenda, anything that anyone saw. All right, seeing none, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes from our every meeting in April.
I'll move.
Linda moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, Ned seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. So the motion carries and the minutes are approved. I'll move us along to our next item on the agenda, and that is the executive director's report. Dave, please take it away.
Thank you, Richard. And I know that some members may not be able to stay the entire meeting. So if it's okay with you, I'll go ahead and pause my report if we can move over that item and go to our discussion on applicants for the advisory committee. That way, more individuals could help with that if that's okay with you.
That is totally fine by me. So if we go down to new business under 8, subpoint A is where the discussion of the new advisory members comes in. And let me just get to my screen on that very quickly.
And Richard, if you don't mind, I can kind of frame this discussion.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so as you may recall, at the last meeting, we talked about advisory committee memberships that open up from time to time. Members serve 2-year terms. Membership is staggered, so we don't have everyone coming up at the same time. But there are 2 members that are coming off of the advisory committee because they've reached their maximum length of service. And we do want to thank them for their service to the advisory committee. But that does mean that 2 other individuals will be able to serve. And so I did provide you all with a copy of the advisory committee policy. It talks about some criteria to weigh when you are looking at new applicants for the advisory committee, but we sent a message to all licensees, asked them if anyone was interested in being considered for the advisory committee to submit a letter of interest and also a resume or a CV. And so we provided those materials for you to review. Currently, with those 2 individuals coming off the advisory committee, at the start of the next fiscal year, which is July 1st, that means there would be 8 non-board members on the advisory committee. And per the policy, there can be as few as 3 and as many as 10. And so you could make recommendations to add 1 new member or as many as 2 new members with the individuals that are going to be departing from the advisory committee. And to assist you, one of the criteria that you're asked to look at is geographic representation or dispersity across the state. I attempted to help you out with that process. I sent a message earlier today identifying some of the locations from advisory committee members. I understand that there were a couple of errors in that. So just to let you know, Christopher Leonard is currently in Wichita, and also Jay Middleton, I believe, is in Pittsburgh. So I apologize about those 2. I was off by 1 name and it did a little cascading effect. But if there's anyone else that has moved since I last updated that information, if there's anything else to update on that, please let us know. Otherwise, if not, I will turn it over to all of you to have a discussion on the applicant. I don't participate in this process, but just try to make sure that all the procedures are followed. So you can do this in a certain number of ways. You can have a formal vote on individuals. You could also alternatively reach consensus by saying, which applicants stood out the most to you. So it doesn't specify which process you have to follow, but if you do vote, it can't be by a secret ballot. So it'd have to be a vote and public discussion. So, but I'll turn it over to you, Richard, and I'll allow you to have a good discussion as a committee.
Thank you. Much appreciated. And I also appreciate that you sent over the message earlier today regarding geographic diversity of advisory committee members. I think that it's really important for us to do what we can to include voices from around the state of Kansas so that all segments of the population of psychologists can be represented so that we can do the job of doing right by the public. So thank you for sending that message over. I appreciate it, David.
You're welcome. And if
I would
anybody,
like to,
sorry, Richard.
oh, go ahead.
If anybody from the public did want that information too, it is posted on the website under the advisory committee. On our page, it does list the current members of the advisory committee and then also their cities. And so that information is available on the website. Just wanted to share that in case anybody's following the meeting at home.
Thank you. Much appreciated. So I would like to open up a discussion about the applicants to the 2 open positions. If we want to recommend the maximum number of 2, or if we would want to single out 1 individual to be on the advisory committee, or if we don't come to a consensus on anyone, that also is something that could occur. I think that we received 7 applicants and we have, again, 2 spaces open. I think that at least from my perspective, all of the applicants have significant strengths that we can consider in the process of selecting someone to become a part of the committee. And I would like to open it up to anyone who first would like to speak on a particular applicant or particular sets of applicants, or give a kind of a general overview of their impressions of what our applicant pool was like. So I would like to open it up to folks. Tiffany.
I just had a question if anyone on the committee currently does a lot of telehealth.
I do a fair amount of telehealth, kind of. I mean, technically I am in person, but I do a whole day's worth of telehealth in my practice.
Okay. I was just asking because I know one of the applicants, I think, is primarily telehealth. So I didn't know. I think that would be something that would be good to add as far as the diversity.
I concur with that. Yes, I don't think anyone else is doing like primarily telehealth on the committee, or am I mistaken?
We do a mix here at the training clinic. You know, I think since COVID, we've definitely done less and less over time, but we still probably do about 30%. And certainly that's part of my practice as well. So.
Mm-hmm.
You remember which applicant that was, Tiffany?
Aaron?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Aaron,
I think it was. I also liked her because I think she was the only early career.
Yes, she was the only.
Yeah. It was a really good group of applicants. I thought all 7 looked pretty amazing, but I did note she was the only early career.
Yes, she is the only early career applicant. And I think that it's important to have early career psychologists be participatory, and committees and processes like the ones that we're involved in tonight. So I think that's a positive too.
I did want to bring up something about this applicant. I remember him, I'm not sure what the gender is, distinctly, because they indicate that they did a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Kansas Medical Center. And I'm the director of training in Division of Psychology, which is in psychiatry, but I've never heard of this individual. And that doesn't mean she didn't do something here. Apparently she did, but that struck me. And I cannot tell from her description in her resume of what she did here where she did it, which kind of bothered me. It's so vague. Does anybody know this individual?
Which person was that?
The person that were Erin Garwood.
Oh, it is. No, I don't know her.
Anyone else? No, Ned, thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate that.
To be honest, I also looked at her doctoral psychology internship, and in the same way, I cannot tell, it's not clear to me what she talks about conducting satisfaction surveys with over 700 respondents. I'm not quite sure I understand what she did.
And you're referencing her internship?
Yeah, her internship after, I mean, maybe somebody's familiar with that health consortium. It just, something about it made me really scratch my head. I'll just throw that out there. I agree that having somebody that does predominantly telehealth would be, of benefit. It's just something about it.
I looked it up and it says she did her postdoc at the Student Counseling Center.
Ah, okay. How'd you find that?
I looked her up in the database and I made a note about it because it was a different site than I was used to seeing.
Okay, well, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts about, and once again, Ned, I really appreciate you bringing that up. That's really important to note. Any other thoughts about the applicant pool? Anyone that stands out in particular from what you read across the 7 applications? I certainly have my thoughts about folks, and I would want for the committee to speak before I do. So.
I liked Dr. Lutz, the research on ethics and postdoc hours I thought was very impressive.
Did his letter read, or maybe it wasn't in his letter, but did it look like he only provided services in Missouri?
And that was a question I had because it read a lot about Missouri, and so but again, I don't have access to where they practice and such, but I noticed that as well.
Yeah,
lots of experience though.
I noticed that he had a lot of experience in Missouri. His the header of his face letter. I'm losing my ability to conjure up words this evening. I believe his header indicated that he was in Overland Park.
It's a little
private
confusing.
practice, what I thought I saw.
Yeah. Ned, were you saying something?
Oh, I was just a little, yeah, it's confusing because he lists University, Springfield, Clinical, Overland Park. So I'm not sure what that means.
I think he lists himself as a professor emeritus, so I'm assuming, he
Yeah,
still has that
that makes sense.
title at that university, but he's probably mainly in private practice, is my best guess from everything. I just would just state, I've known Bob Twillman for forever. He used to be at KU Medical Center, and he's now at St. Luke's. But Bob certainly, been around for a long time. He knows his pain management, does a lot of consulting. I think certainly has a lot of good skill sets. So, but that's the only person I know personally. The only other question I had for the committee is I noticed one of the applicants, well, 2 things. One is one person is more child focused, and I know we do have some representation for that, but that was just one thing to note, the person that's at Children's Mercy. And then also one person noted forensics as a specialty area, and I actually wasn't sure what the representation of that was on the committee, so.
2 very good questions. Let's take CNA first, child and adolescent. Anyone primarily child and adolescent? Oh.
Linda Heitzman Powell is.
Yes. Linda, yes. Okay. I'm technically child
For
and
answering
adolescent.
for me.
You're welcome.
I'm technically child and adolescent, but I'm seeing adults primarily right now. Second one being that of forensics. Anyone primarily?
I do forensics.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I think with Randy, I think that's the forensic person, right? Yeah, a lot of history there with forensics, as well as he does a different type of forensics. I'm more criminal, but he does the, family child custody. He probably has some criminal as well, but. So.
No, I thought that was something. Well, I know that's something that stood out for me, that he did a lot of forensics work. And I would also say the first couple of applicants that were listed, Doctors Fontaine, Arlock, are doing a lot of integrated behavioral health, and I think that is an advantage. I'm currently doing integrated behavioral health, but I'm in a specialty clinic, so having someone or having folks who do IBH and primary care settings, and a lot of the field is moving in that direction. I think that is those are advantages too. And to one more quick thing to your point about Dr. Twillman, yes, he has extensive experience, and I really like the research piece of things. I know that not all of us are doing research, and I think that it can be really helpful to, well, Linda, I'll call Linda again. Linda does research, but I think that's really advantageous because we don't get a lot of psychologists on the committee that are primary research based.
I would definitely lend my support to both Sarah and you, Richard, about Dr. Twellman. I've known him for years. He's a very level-headed guy as well. I always appreciate his input on many, many issues.
I don't know. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's okay.
Are you sure? Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know any of these people being in a rural area, in Hutch, but I do like, I agree with you, Dr. Lutz and Dr. Twillman. Those two really have, they all have really, really good credentials. And I like the fact that Dr. Lutz has had all these years of experience and going back 40 years, it looks like, just looking through his stuff. And so I would, those two people for sure. And then Dr. Parker has a lot of, like you were saying, a whole lot of experience, especially with forensics and stuff. And so there's just a lot of good applicants. Those are the ones that stand out in my mind, anyways, going through these. Just want to share that thought. So,
no, thank you, Mark. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Can't really speak on anybody other than Garlock. He's Dr. Garlock. He's someone that I actually was on a supervisory team when he was at Prairie View with one of our interns in Wichita. And I thought he's very good character, very good insights, research based. He brings some varying experiences in his background. He's worked within the El Dorado Correctional Facility. I think he also worked up in Topeka's correctional facility. And he's also worked in community mental health, and now he's in private practice. He's also in Topeka, which I don't think anyone right now is represented from Topeka. And so I think that would be another kind of interesting ad for him.
That's a really good point, Chris. I appreciate that. Because Matt, where are you? Are you in Manhattan?
Yes.
Okay. I think that there are, positive qualities for all of these folks, and it sounds like Dr. Twillman comes well received. It sounds like Dr. Lutz has made an impression upon us, and Dr. Garlock comes well received from Dr. Leonard. Do we think that those two individuals that have come pretty well received from folks on the committee, Drs. Twillman and Garlock, would be folks that we would want to appoint to the advisory committee, or are there strong thoughts about another candidate that we should take into consideration? I would offer that with respect to Dr. Zangrillo, I really appreciated the work that she does. And she's also, I think, a behavior analyst. So that is something that I deeply appreciate. And Linda is chairing the behavior analyst advisory committee, and she may be a good fit for both this committee and for Linda's committee. I don't want to put anything on Linda, but any thoughts about those two or anyone else? Anything that we might be overlooking, or anything that you feel strongly about? Well, seeing none, it looks like there was some consensus around Dr. Twillman. And again, there were quite a few positive thoughts about Dr. Lutz, and Dr. Garlock comes well recommended. So that's 3 psychologists for 2 slots. And does anyone feel strongly one way or another about those 3?
I would like to point out, thank you for pointing that out. I don't know how I missed that on her CV that she's a BCBAD. There's not many of us out there that are licensed in both fields. And she's got a pretty good, maybe she could apply to the Behavior Analyst Advisory Committee.
I would just chime in, and again, I don't have a really strong preference, but I know many of us have had experiences and hold Dr. Twellman in a high regard, and I'm sure Dr. Lutz is similar. I just have no personal experience with him at all. And I think in some ways they have some kind of equal qualities, if you will. So I would be about probably not putting both of them on the committee, because that just doesn't make as much sense to me given the comparison of their CVs. So my vote would be probably to take one of them if we're going to take either one of them and not both of them, between Lutz and Twillman. And then I think the other two runners from my perspective would be the woman that you're talking about that has that behavioral analysis expertise, and then the woman from Topeka, VA, who also has that VA component and the integrated primary health, just in terms of kind of, again, representation.
That's Dr. Fontaine for folks, for folks' reference. No, thank you, Sarah. No, I really appreciate those observations, especially with respect to the similar qualities between Doctors Lutz and Twellman. That's a really good point.
I'm sorry, which one was the BCVA?
That's Dr. Zangrillo.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I would be in favor of Dr. Twellman, and I did like Dr. Fontaine and what she's doing, and she's in Topeka also, you said?
Her Vita says she's at the Topeka VA in their integrated primary care.
I like that idea. I don't think we have any. Is anybody in the VA? I don't think so.
Oh, wow. I thought at least one of us was at the VA. No, I'm thinking of Matt, and Matt is not at the VA. Matt is.
I'm former military psychologist, but I'm in private practice now. I would agree. I mean, I think that's the VA representation, because that is anything that's government related, and I make no comments to the current state of that, is a very unique facility to work in. So
yes,
I think that's a unique experience for sure.
So, excuse me. It sounds like there's some shifting going on to Dr. Fontaine, and kind of staying with Dr. Twellman. Anyone who would be opposed to that idea of nominating Drs. Fontaine and Twellman to be on the Licensed Psychology Advisory Committee?
I think that's a good idea. Just the way I love the comment made, I think by Sarah, about the diversity, about having the government representation. I know I do some consulting for the VA in Wichita, and that's very important as well. So I really like your idea, that about having that diversity there. I'm in favor of those two, Jennifer Fontaine and Robert Twellman, personally.
And before we possibly make a motion in that direction, I always want to hear in any committee that I'm in, I would like to hear from the public, and we have a public member here. And David, do you have any thoughts about any of these candidates that we are going in?
No, I think the discussion's been really, helpful for me, but I like the direction.
Thank you. That being said, it looks like we are going to nominate Dr. Jennifer Fontaine and Dr. Robert Twellman. Did I get his first name correct? Yes, Dr. Robert Twellman to be members of the Licensed Psychology Advisory Committee. Do I have a motion, or, well, let me take a step back. would this be of consensus? Are there anyone would want to not nominate these folks? Seeing none, it looks like we've arrived at unanimous consent, David, and the individuals that the committee is proposing would be, again, Dr. Jennifer Fontaine and Dr. Robert Twillman.
Okay, that sounds great. The next step from the technical perspective is I will draft a letter summarizing the advisory committee's review of the applicants and recommendation. And then once I've drafted that, Richard, I'll provide a copy of that to you so you can review it and make sure that it reflects the work of the advisory committee. And then we'll go ahead and forward that to the chair of the board, David Anderson. According to the advisory committee policy, the chair of the board has official authority to appoint new members to the advisory committees. So the next opportunity for that to occur would be at the July board meeting, which is scheduled for July 28th. So that's the next step. And usually what I do is I wait until the official appointment has happened at the board meeting. But as long as that moves through without any issues, then at that point, I would reach out to both of the applicants, let them know that they've been appointed, and then provide information about future meetings to them.
Thank you. Much appreciate you giving us an outline of how things will proceed onward. And thank you all again for participating in the process. I know that it takes time to read these vita and these cover letters. And I appreciate the discussion that we've had about what was a really good crop of candidates to be on the advisory committee. Thank you all for your participation. I'll move us back up to agenda item 4, and that is the executive director's report. I'll turn it over to you, Dave.
All right, thank you, Richard. And we have a few other items on the agenda, so I'll keep this somewhat short, but I do want to highlight a couple of things in terms of BSRB operations, and then highlight one of the items the board is currently working on to keep you informed about that as well. So first, in terms of BSRB operations, we are coming up on about 5 to 6 months since all of the professions were under the CE broker banner. You may recall that in the fall of last year, the board voted to reach an agreement with a company called CE Broker and to partner with that company. That is a free agreement for the licensing board, and it's also free for all of our licensees. That company provides a portal for individuals to upload documentation of their continuing education hours. We currently audit 10% of licensees when they renew their license. And at that time, we need verification that they've completed all of their CE hours. And so if they activate the account with CE Broker and upload their documentation and assign it in certain categories, if they're pulled for audit, we can log into the portal, check their hours very quickly, and then approve them through the audit process very quickly. Compared to the current process in which we have things go back and forth, review them, and then once they're reviewed, let the people know if they are approved for audit or let them know if there were any added issues with their hours. So we are encouraging people to sign up. This was something that we made sure to keep as an optional choice for licensees. And so no one is required to use CE Broker, but we are encouraging more and more people to sign up for it because we think it is a good benefit for licensees, and the more people who sign up for it, the more efficient we will be in the licensing staff when we're auditing people. So I think I'll just briefly pause here. What I've been doing for the other advisory committees is just collecting some feedback. If you have activated an account, if you're using CE Broker, or if maybe you have colleagues who have activated accounts, I'm having a meeting in about a week with representatives of CE Broker, and I'm going to be collecting information in terms of how many of our licensees have activated accounts, if they've experienced any issues, if there's things that we can do to make that process smoother, and if there's any kind of, trying to get pros and cons and trying to make this thing work as smoothly as possible for everyone involved. And so, like I said, I'll pause here. And if you have any feedback, I wanted to receive that from each of the advisory committees before I talk with them. So do you have any feedback based on personal experience or things you've heard from colleagues?
I have not yet signed up, but I have a point where I have a number of CEUs that I need to document at the end of a consultation group that I'm a part of. So I will be doing that within the next couple of weeks.
Well, any other comments or feedback? If not, I'll just make a push and say that I would encourage you to sign up for it, try it out. Like I said, you're not required to use it. If you do activate an account and you experience issues, please let me know. If you find that it works out well and it is something positive, please also communicate that back to me as well. It's just helpful for us to know. We did put in a fair amount of time working with the e-broker to try to make sure this would work for all 7 professions, and we used a staggered approach. So we had 3 different stages in which we opened this up for different levels of licensees. So we will continue to remind people that it's an available resource and encourage people to sign up for it. So if you do happen to try it out in the next few months, just please let us know and let us know how your experience went with that. In terms
Dave,
of
Dave, one quick question. Would you be all right, or your office be all right with sending out the link for signing up again? I can't remember when the LPs, when we got the link originally.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. Also on the BSRB website, under our news section, there is a place that we have archived news if it's beyond about the last 4 or 5 months. And so if you go to our news section, click on more news, and then you click on archive news, you will come up with a lot of past articles that we have published. And there's 2 on there, one from October and there's one from January that do have those links. But I'll go ahead and send it out to the members of the advisory committee again. And when you do go in there to try to activate your account, just make sure that you're using the full title for the license. So instead of saying 1, 2, 3, 4, say LP and then the license number. This is a portal that's being used for different types of licenses. And so we've encountered that with a few people. It was originally, I think, set up for a veterinary board with one of the states. And so as they've had more and more professions come through with different states, for individuals who go to it and just put in the number, they get a mixed result. And they have it. We've just heard a lot of responses from that. But if you go there and you enter the LP and then the number, it should be fine. So, but I will send that out.
Include any zeros that in the number.
Yes,
If your number starts with a 0, you have to include that.
Well, I will let you know after I meet with the e-broker and bring back some news and let you know kind of the response rate, because I'm curious about that too, in terms of how many of our licensees are using it. And then we'll hear from them if they've received any kind of concerns or anything like that from our licensees. So,
and I would just say that, yes, I would also encourage all of us and all those who might be watching that are psychologists to sign up for CE Broker. It's free and it's a great resource to use so that you can keep track of your continuing education credits.
Well, I thought, some of our work that is, that you can see from the website, you can kind of see some other news that is coming up. One item I'm trying to make people aware of through the advisory committees is that beginning July 1st of 2025, the continuing education hour requirement is changing for certain levels of licensing for some of the professions. Beginning July 1st, 2025, the 6-hour requirement of diagnosis and treatment is decreasing from 6 hours every license renewal cycle to 3 hours. And this was something that was passed in law a couple years ago, but it had a delayed implementation. So basically the way that it will work is that as of July 1st, 2025, we will be able to start using that new standard. And if you have, like, let's say your license expires at the end of August, and you want to renew it now, I would probably recommend, if you don't have your hours already completed, waiting until at least July 1st so that you can use the new standard. Even if you have a license expiration that's out in the future, you wouldn't be able to use that standard until at least July 1st. But this is something, it's not really something the board had requested to be changed. It was a proposal the board had asked in a bill with a number of other items the board had put forward. There had been a number of different associations who were advocating for continuing education in the area of cultural diversity. And so what the board had proposed as a way to not limit the number of hours that could be received in certain categories was to add a new requirement of 3 hours in that category a couple of years ago, and then to decrease the number of hours of diagnosis and treatment from 3 to 6, so that the same number of hours would be required, but it would be in those two different categories. What the legislature did is they said the legislature decided to remove the proposal for the hours in cultural diversity training, but they decided to keep the hours lowered from 6 to 3. So that was something the legislature decided to do. And so that was passed in law. And so now we're to the point to where we're implementing that change. Our requirements in terms of ethics and diagnosis and treatment are included in the statutes. So that is something that does go before the legislature if we adjust those types of things. In terms of the total number of hours, that's in the regulation. So we have a bit more flexibility in terms of looking at total hours for profession, but that's how this change came about. So wanted to make sure that anybody who is coming upon the end of a license renewal cycle or who's going to be renewing your license in the future, we sent out a message to all licensees about this upcoming change. We'll put out another announcement about it on the website as of July 1st to make sure that people are seeing this information, but wanted to share it with you all as well.
And if I remember correctly, all psychologists, we renew on June 30th, or must renew by June 30th, 2026.
June of even numbered years.
Yes.
But I know that there are some professionals who hold several licenses under the BSRB, and those are usually 2 years after you received your initial license. So in case you are in that category, when you come up, and if there's a requirement for the hours in diagnosis and treatment, that'll now be 3 hours. And if you are using the CE broker system, they're going to be implementing this change for us as well.
Question, David. This might be more than you want to bite off, but if we want our licensees to use CE broker because we think it would be easy for them and easier for us, would it be possible to put a link for each profession that has access to CE broker on their individual license page? So it would say, sign up for CE broker, right? Or CE broker available to manage your CEs or something, instead of having it buried in an archived page on the website, because that keeps it front and center and people are going to be much more likely to sign up.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good recommendation. We do have professions pages for each of the professions, and I think that would be a nice place to put that link. So we'll see about adding that to the different pages so that people can have a direct way to get into that. Because I don't want people to forget about this as a resource, and that would be a nice way to keep it on the radar.
Yeah. And then that way you're also capturing new licensees as well that may not have been around to catch the archive.
Thank you. That's a very good idea.
Thank you, Linda, for contributing that. Those are really good ideas.
Yeah.
I have them every once in a while.
Well, I want to let you know about 2 other items we're working on behind the scenes. You may not see these very much until we actually make a big change, but we are about the 7th agency in line to switch our licensing system to the state's new enterprise licensing system with a company called Acela. And this is something the board heard about in the fall and made a decision to move forward on. And so we have been, members of my staff have been meeting a lot with the Office of Information Technology Services. They've been doing a lot of work to understand all of our existing processes, including our forms, to make sure that when the system is built, we would be able to integrate a lot of our functionality and avoid duplicate processes. And so right now, individuals are able to renew their licenses online. One of the best benefits of moving to this new system will be applicants will be able to apply for licensure online. It'll have an integrated payment system. So it'll all kind of be a lot of the things that we're doing separately that we're having to pull together manually it will all come together, and we're really excited about that. But it will take about another year and a half for us to be fully under that. When we are getting close, we will definitely promote that. We still want to allow individuals the option to apply for licensure through paper if they choose to do so. But we think it'll be a much better benefit for individuals to do the online application process. So that is something we're working on. And also, we're doing some work in terms of our records here at the office. We are trying to move towards storing information as electronic records instead of paper records. This is a good shift, but it does take some time. And so we've made some good positive changes in the last few years in terms of adjusting our records retention schedule and transferring more older records to the State Archive of the Historical Society. We are trying to make some additional changes to make sure that we clarify what records are important to keep and which ones we can transfer. And then we're ultimately going to be seeking for us to be able to retain our records electronically, but we have to make sure that we follow a certain process for that, where we have good quality backups, good quality scans, and then we can upload that information into the new system. So we're taking steps forward, and like I said, you may not be able to see this from the outside because a lot of this is just being done internally, but I'm really proud of the work that our staff is doing. I think it'll be a big benefit for the agency once we're all done with this. Moving next to just a couple items from the last board meeting. The board met in May, and I always try to keep the advisory committee informed about items that are taking place at the board meeting. The biggest item I want to make you aware of is that you spent a lot of really quality time going through the unprofessional conduct regulations for your profession, and you had a lot of really thoughtful recommendations for changes, and then you reviewed the changes from other professions and made further changes based on those. All of those recommended changes were forwarded to the board, and working with members of my staff, we were able to take all of those proposed changes and create a giant grid of all of the unprofessional conduct items. And we put each item side by side with the same item for the other profession, so that the members of the board can see across all the professions, here is the language, so they can make decisions as far as should the language be standardized across the profession, or are there items that are unique given some of the different aspects of the profession that it would make sense for the language to be different, or for there to be an item specifically for psychologists if it's not an equivalent item for the other profession. So I think we are getting towards the end of the process in terms of updated unprofessional conduct regulations, but I think this type of a cleanup and standardization is going to be really helpful to clarify things for licensees going forward. And I'm really happy with all the work that's been done so far. I know this has been a long process. It's been somewhat tedious, but like we said when we started this, you know, some of these regulations had not been updated in over 20 years. So this work was definitely due. And I've been really happy with the work that I've seen from the advisory committees. I've been really happy with the work the board is doing. I just think we're just continuing to push forward. But if you want to see some impressive documents, I would encourage you to check out some of those items that are posted on the website. It is really interesting to see them all side by side now that we have those all combined. So also the board heard from a guest presenter that had to do with certain disciplinary remedies that the board could pursue. We have a complaint review committee that reviews complaints and makes determinations if there have been violations. There are certain tools available to the current complaint review committee, but the agency that did a presentation talked about some other alternative processes that could be used if the board and the complaint review committee wish to pursue those items. This company called eBOS. And so we're always kind of looking to see what are best practices, what are things that make sense in terms of rehabilitation and other efforts. And so the board will need to have a little bit further discussion on that at the next board meeting in July. If the board approves that, we would be able to allow our complaint review committee to access those resources as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and end my report and see if there's any questions on any items I talked about or anything else going on with the BSRB.
A question. Is there any update on the proposed regulation changes from January? Where's that status at?
Yes, so we are in the process of moving a number of different regulations through. Those will need to be reviewed by the Department of Administration and approved, and then reviewed by the Attorney General's office and approved But the recommendations that have been forwarded to the board have been approved. There have been a few different recommended changes to some of the regulations, but the board did receive the recommended changes from the committee. And one of those had to do with the recommendation to for individuals who receive their education from an APA accredited school, that would be sufficient instead of also meeting the specific coursework requirements. So that was one of the recommendations. There was also some recommended changes that had to do with the language on in residence to basically remove the definition of in residence and specifically state which courses needed to be in person, and then to further clarify that item. And but basically every item the advisory committee has recommended to be moved to the board. The board has had the opportunity to review and ask questions about, and they have recommended those changes. So with those, we are moving those through the process. I don't have a time frame in terms of exactly when those will go through, but I think we're optimistic that the current regulations we're working on, which also include a few other unrelated items like some fee decreases and other things, we're hopeful that those will go through before the end of the year. But a lot of that will kind of depend on the time frame of reviewing the regulations by Department of Administration and also the Attorney General's office. So I'll provide more updates as those move through the process. But like I said, I think the goal is if we can get those at least open for public comment later this fall, then we would be able to implement them before the end of the year. But some of that time frame is out of our hands, just with other agencies reviewing some of that information.
Thank you for the question, Chris.
Question
Anyone else
two.
have any questions?
Yeah, I
Go ahead,
do.
Linda.
So, you know that group that came and presented on the remediation for complaints that had the, right? So, was there a fee attached? I didn't get, so I'm sure there's a fee that's attached to using their system. So, where does that go from here? Is that something that we gather information on, present it to our advisory committees, and see if our advisory committees think that that's, you know, the next best thing? It was interesting because it was put together. So for anybody that's not on the board, it's an organization that looks at complaints that are levied against professionals, and they provide like hands-on training, right? Not just you have to go do a CE on this particular topic, but they're really in the weeds with it, and they walk with the person. So where's that go from here?
Yeah, so the company's called EatBoss, and the model that they use is so essentially some of the items that you talked about, where let's say someone has a confidentiality violation. So one of the resources available to disciplinary boards could be a proposal to the person that let's say in some of our cases right now, if there's a finding of a violation, in some cases what the complaint review committee does is has something called a consent agreement order, where it states, you know, here's what happened, here's the authority of the board. Our proposal to you is there should be a certain number of hours of continuing education, or possibly a fine, or, you know, let's say supervision for a year or something like that. So there are some resources available to the board. You could go further. You could have a summary proceeding order, which would order things like, you know, public censure or a suspension, or even as far as license revocation. But this would probably be something that would be more of a tool under those consent agreement orders, where, you know, the board could propose something which would say, you know, the violation was a confidentiality violation. Our proposal to you would be to work with this company and go through their intensive process by which, you know, you work on this issue with them. The cost of that service, from what I understand it, is something that the licensee would need to pay for. So that is something that they would agree. So it wouldn't be a cost to the board. And ultimately, in that kind of a situation, it would be something for the licensee, to agree to under the terms of that consent agreement order. And so if they agreed that was something that they were going to accept as the remedy for violating the standards or the statutes, then that is something they would agree to, understanding that the cost to pay for that would be something that they would be picking up. And so that's kind of how that would work.
So is that something that we should, like, since it was, an official presentation to the board, is that something we should summarize and make available to each of the advisory committees so they could weigh in on it? I don't know how that works, David.
Yeah, usually that's something more for the board to kind of discuss.
Is it? Okay.
But any of the members of the advisory committee, if you're curious about that, that meeting was posted on the YouTube channel. So you could go back and watch. It was in the first, I think, 30 minutes of the meeting. But there is a presentation, so you could kind of see some of the tools they were talking about. But usually that kind of a resource, ultimately the board would need to make a decision. Do you want to contract with this group? If it was a service that would be for a cost, then ultimately it would probably be something that the board would have to put out for an RFP. But given the model they're using where there is no direct cost to the board, it's really not a cost that would fall under something that we would need to have competitively bid. So I think ultimately the next step is for the board to discuss it at the July meeting and then decide if they think it would be a good idea for as a resource for the complaint review committee.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, David, for your report, and I'll move this along to number 5 on our agenda, and that's update on the SIPAC multi-state compact.
Okay. And Richard, I know as our commissioner, you'll be attending the mid-year meeting coming up in July.
Yes, so there will be a almost full day meeting that will be via teleconference on the 14th of July, and I will be in attendance for the proceedings of that meeting. And I don't have anything to report with respect to any updates on SIPAC.
Yeah, I don't have any news on SIPAC as well. We'll continue to monitor individuals signing up for SIPAC, and as they put out newsletters, we'll try to include those in your materials so you can continue to follow the work that SIPAC is doing. And also, I'll make a plug for the SIPAC website. There's also information posted on the SIPAC website if you're curious about that as well.
Any questions about the about any updates or any matters related to SIPAC? Moving us along, I'll take us to old business. You'll see there are 3 matters to attend to under old business. There are 2 matters to attend to under new business under point 7. I'll take us to old business first, and I think that going in order still seems to be the way to go. And that would lead us to point A, and that is a continued discussion on possible changes to the postdoc year requirement. Dave, I'll have you frame the discussion for us.
Okay. So you may recall in some previous meetings, we had some guests that visited the advisory committee. One individual was a representative from the Kansas Psychological Association, and he encouraged the advisory committee to consider recommending to the board some additional flexibilities in terms of completing the postdoc year. And he talked a little bit about what some other states have in place and asked that there be not removal of the postdoc year, but the ability for some individuals to start to accrue some of those hours earlier. And so there appeared to be some support from the advisory committee concerning that possibility. And so in your packet of material, I've included a draft of KAR 102-1-5. It is the supervised experience and supervisor qualifications for psychology. And Leslie has marked up that copy with some potential changes. But we provided this at the last meeting, and you had a little discussion about this topic, but we wanted to make sure that additional advisory committee members had the opportunity to review some of that and had the opportunity to weigh in on this as a concept. I can share my screen if it'd be helpful for members to see that language. Would you like me to go ahead and do that? Okay. And I'll go ahead and share my screen here with a copy of the regulation that I highlighted. If the text is too small, let me know. I'll go ahead and increase the size. And with me sharing my screen, I may not be able to see if someone has their hand up. So if you do have any comments or questions, feel free to just kind of say them out loud and we can go through it. And actually, I'll turn it over to Leslie Allen, the Assistant Director and Licensing Manager for the BSRB. Leslie might be able to kind of talk through some of the items that she marked on this copy. And then I think Leslie also had maybe a couple questions for the advisory committee on things to consider as well. So Leslie, do you have some comments on this?
Sure. Sorry. So yes, we talked last time about the reg and stating that a minimum of 1 year shall be pre-doc internship of at least 1,800 hours and shall meet the internship requirements specified below in the regulation. The remaining year and 1,800 hours of supervised experience shall be pre-doc, postdoc, or combination of pre and postdoctoral supervised experience. And then I wasn't sure exactly on the requirements, like for supervision, for postdoc, it's 1 to 20. For pre-doc, it's 1 to 10. So 1 hour to every 10 clinical services that they're providing. And I did say that there are, I have a list of different questions that I presented last time, specifically like what other requirements should be listed under the pre-internship / practicum, what ratio of supervision to direct client contact, do you want to allow hours attained in the first year of the doctoral program? Some states do not allow that, or another one said that the only way you can count the first year is if you had completed a master's degree in psychology. Then you could count your first year in the doctoral program with the practicum. And should there be a specific amount of direct client contact required, or a percentage of their time spent in the practicum should be direct client contact? The language, do you prefer pre-internship, practicum, internship, etc.? And finally, if the person completed like a 2,000-hour internship rather than 1,800 or 1,500, would you want to allow them to count the additional hours toward the other 1,800 hours? But if you did that, that would change the requirement of 2 full years. You'd have to make a little bit of change for the time frame. And I know someone had asked for a grid. I have not, or a chart. I have not been able to do that. I apologize. I've been really busy with the database, trying to do all of the stuff for the new database and some personal issues. So I apologize for that. If you still need me to do that, I can work on it for the next meeting.
And Leslie, when you say a grid, were you talking about what other states have in place, or?
Yes. Someone had asked about a grid or a chart showing what each state, but there's 17 states that don't require a postdoc. So I have not had a chance to review all those states' requirements.
Personally, my own opinion, I'm going back 50 years, so I'm way outdated. I've just been in private practice for 50 years. Back in those days, I really liked the flexibility there. Back then, it was 2,000 hours for a pre-doctoral internship. And then I did a postdoctoral internship at Chapel Hill at the medical school. And it was another 2,000 hours of supervision. And to me, that worked really well. Again, I'm going back all these years. I'm not up on the current thinking of the different schools now, but I like the flexibility of the fact that it can be done, a combination of the two, because you might end up spending a little bit more time on the pre-doc and not quite as much on the post-doc, or vice versa. So I personally like the way it's worded myself. Just again, I'm going back a lot of years, and I realize that. So kind of ancient now. Okay.
I think I come from a generation not too far away from yours, Mark. And I like the way it was done then. And I think we're thinking about things in different ways these days. I continue to have a lot of difficulty with the conceptualization here. I know there was discussion last time about differences in the level of training that somebody at the postdoctoral, level receives compared to practicum, that they're in some ways kind of treated as, I guess, in a way, almost, I don't want to say the same, but it's really changes the nature, of the training being received if we do it that way. And also something I want to observe is that regarding the postdoctoral supervised experience, all of that was written to be, very stringent, in terms of what a postdoctoral experience would consist in. And if we're going to eliminate, the requirement that be present, then it looks like that we're being awfully hard on people in their postdoctoral experience if they can also meet the same requirement by getting it in a predoctoral way. So I hate to put any, burden on anybody to write or try to deal with this more than they already are. Like Leslie, you've been working on this, but it, to me, needs to be rewritten and reconceptualized rather than trying to kind of strike out things, because it's just a very different way that we're thinking about it if we want to, do differently than we have been doing. That's my view.
I would say that this is just the supervision and the qualifications for supervision in the education regulation. There is a whole section on internship and how that has to look if it's not APA accredited. So in my thought, that would be part of it would be there regarding the practicum. And that is, I mean, there are a lot more requirements in that, like how many hours of supervision, how many doctors have to be present at the internship site, how many hours have to be in training rather than just, providing services. There's a whole list. And I don't know if you want us to pull that up. I can ask Dave to do that, if that's what you're talking about. I don't know.
I think what I was hearing, but Ned, you tell me if I'm hearing you wrong. I think you were saying that we wouldn't want it to be more difficult for somebody that does a postdoc compared to somebody who doesn't, which makes
Right.
sense. I mean, we wouldn't want to make it harder for somebody to become licensed because they choose to do a postdoc. So I think that's what he was saying, Leslie, if I'm not
Yes.
putting words in your mouth, Ned.
Yeah,
And
you're
I could see how just for a lot of reasons that wouldn't be a very good idea. But so I think just the logistics of if one may choose to do a postdoc. I mean, I know what I hear from my trainees, Ned, is if they're in states, they're living in states where they'd prefer to get a license, they'd like to do that quickly and they're ready to go. They do that pre-doc. It does just ease that path to licensure. Typically, Leslie, my experience with the other states, but I have not examined a grid, is there can be some differential hours requirements. It's typically about contact hours. And then they do have sometimes specifications for setting numbers of people on site, kind of the same kind of stuff they do for internship. And also typically it is in their later years of enrollment. So not their first year, like you said. I'd say that's most typical. The other thing I think is on the postdoc side, what I hear from trainees is when they choose to do a postdoc in a state that accepts pre-doc hours, it's typically, Ned, because they do want more intensive training, and they're not ready to just fly solo without a more intensive year of training. And it's an elective choice, if you will. Because like you said, the postdoc is going to require, more of you.
In the old days, you're right, Sarah, the old days of the postdoc was elective all the way, totally. But it definitely should not be harder than the pre-doc. You shouldn't feel that pressure. I totally agree. But it does definitely build up the confidence, at least it did for me before I went solo. So I'm in favor of postdoc for that reason, additional supervision, but it shouldn't be a pressure situation for people as far as licensing. I agree.
And what I'm hearing from you, Leslie, is this is just an option. So one could elect to do it if they choose to. But I hear what Ned's saying is like we shouldn't make it harder on people. But if it is an elective choice, that may just be what they choose to do, is to do something that's more intensive, which may be a postdoc, because that's their just chosen path for training.
Right. I just didn't want them to think that was the only written language about internship or pre-doc. Yes, and it would, and I asked last time about how many hours people typically get, and they said it could vary, from very little to 2,000 practicum hours. So, because a lot of I've seen from other states where people have used practicum, but they still have to do postdoc for a certain amount of hours to meet the 1,800. So I guess it just depends on where you go and what you're doing.
And the other thing I'd add to that with the supervision aspect is with postdoc experiences, if you're in a state that doesn't require postdoc and you want to move, some people still elect to receive that supervision so they have that mobility, because there's only 17 states that, have this non-need for a postdoc. That means the majority of our states still require it. And so making sure that that option, and we lay it out in a way that could be beneficial if they want to move, that it's documented, I think is important. But definitely we shouldn't be creating more barriers at the end of the day if we want more people in this profession and licensed. So.
We do have a lot of, because Missouri is a state that is considered to have substantially equivalent requirements, except that they don't require a postdoc now. So we do have a lot of people who come from Missouri who want reciprocity, and they have to show us that they completed a postdoc, and really most of them have. So.
Just to expand on this, I think that the regulations, as I read them, are the regulations or I guess regulations for the postdoc is meant to be stringent so that things other than that don't count as a postdoc, that's been required for licensure. That's part of the muddled nature of it, is that then we've got somebody that can get pre-doctoral hours to count, then they do their internship, which does have stringent requirements, but it seems to me that we're not only moving to less training in order to get the license, but we're also reducing the quality of the training by not requiring a postdoc, but allowing the pre-doctoral, and by pre-doctoral I don't mean internship, I mean practicum training to count, and that bothers me. I appreciate that, we want to get people into the field and so on. I would question, is it really the case that the reason we don't have more psychologists in the field is because we're requiring them to do a postdoctoral, training year. I also made myself unpopular with KPA by bringing this up, so just trying to keep it real here.
Well, no, I appreciate your insight and your analysis on this. I think that it's important to ensure for to the public, it's what we do at the BSRB. And I think that it's important to take what you have said into consideration, especially at least from where I'm sitting, the matter of whether or not the training that has been acquired over the course of the practica years, if that is if that stands up in a similar way, the training that has been received in the postdoctoral years, and by definition, it isn't the same. They aren't equivalents because there are developmental differences between a practicum student and a postdoctoral fellow. So no, I appreciate you bringing that up.
I think that
Oh, go ahead, please.
I think the other thing I'd be interested in with looking at is the programs that these students are coming from. If it's an APA accredited program, what are the regulations when it comes to practicums and the review and the evaluation, and who are they, for it to count as a practicum site, are they being supervised by a licensed psychologist? And I would assume APA would have some guidelines for accreditation within those doc programs. And I just don't know them off the top of my head. I've been to a couple evaluations and reviews, and they interview practicum sites and things like that. But I don't know what else is going on behind the scenes with those doc programs. But I'd think that they'd be requiring those levels and oversight.
Sarah, aren't you a DCT? Or you're the director
I'm not
of
the
clinic?
DCT, I'm the associate DCT.
Okay.
So I just want to be clear about that. So yeah, can you say exactly what it is that you wanted to know? So I make sure I've got it
I was
clear.
wondering if you were the director of clinical training to speak to what Chris was saying about the requirements for individual programs with respect to practica and other opportunities to receive training
Yeah.
from your perspective at KU.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I was clear. So basically, in terms of our practicum requirements, we follow the APA standards for approving those practicums. So they have to meet certain standards. For example, that they have to be supervised by a licensed psychologist. So again, to count for our accredited practicum hours that we submit basically for our review for APA accreditation. And they have to be in approved settings. They have to go through a vetting process for that. So they are engaged in activities where they're getting an appropriate level of supervision. So that's typically 1 hour of supervision per week. And so those are the kind of contact hours, like when I do these pre-doc submissions or attestations, they've met our criteria for a practicum hour. We do have some externals sometimes where they're counting some hours for internship that don't meet the APA accreditation practicum standards, but they may meet the AP standard, which can be sometimes supervision by, for example, other professionals other than a PhD level psychologist, but then they have to have umbrella supervision. So for example, Dr. Leonard, I wouldn't count those if I was doing those attestations because they wouldn't, in my mind, meet those hours. But I will tell you this, and Leslie, you chime in here, most of them that I see, the students are not counting every hour they did here. They just need a chunk. And it's usually to complement what they did on internship. And my experience is it's not like super high. Sometimes our students aren't counting all of their hours. So that's been my experience. And I don't attest to any master's level hours for people that came in with master's level hours. Those don't count at all. So when I do those attestations.
If they have a master's degree in psychology,
Coming
can
in.
they count the first year of their practicum in the doctoral program?
So we don't approve for a program that we don't manage. Does that make sense? Because we can't really oversee somebody's training in a different program. So I would never attest to those hours, even though they occurred in their second year of training, for a licensure attestation, because I can't approve somebody else's program and somebody else's supervision. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
So we have
Yeah,
some students that come in with a master's.
Right, but one of the things that I had read was that if they have a master's degree, then they can count their first year of practicum in the doctoral program.
Oh, I
But
see
if
what
they
you're
are,
saying. We're just talking about a different year thing.
yeah.
Yeah, for me, that their first year of practicum is actually here, their second year of
Okay.
practicum. So
Okay.
yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
I appreciate everyone chiming in on this discussion, and what I would want to do now, because we have a couple of other items to discuss. There have been some concerns, understandably raised, with respect to um, the mix of hours and how those hours are how folks are supervised, and a number of other factors. I would want to get a sense of how we would want to proceed in this discussion, if we would want to if we would want to collect more information from other states, or if we would want to do other research. I will graciously ask Ned and others who have indicated concerns, how they would like to proceed forward.
Are we being asked to make a recommendation by anyone to the board, or how does this coming up in the first place? Please forgive me, I'm not recalling the history.
So,
oh, go ahead, Richard.
So I was just going to say that it was brought to the APA, and they made in their presentation about about changing the postdoctoral requirement. The discussion was initiated from them, if I am remembering correctly. And Dave, am I speaking to this correctly?
Yes, you are. They had requested some time for public comments, and a representative from KPA came to the advisory committee and presented some information as a proposal, and asked the advisory committee if the advisory committee could research this, and then they requested if the advisory committee could recommend a change, because that's what they were advocating for. And we've stayed in conversation since that point, and they've offered to provide any additional information if we have any other questions. And so that's how that originally started.
One question I think would be worth some degree of follow-up is the one that Ned posed. And I certainly made the argument, Ned, that I want as many people getting into being licensed psychologists in Kansas as we can get, because we really need folks to get into our profession. But one thing I don't know the answer to is, has someone done the research to see if those states that do have those pre-doc actually see a jump in people entering the profession? And I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if APA's done research on that or others have. So I'd be totally willing to look into that.
So the other thing that is somewhat of a companion to that is, do we see an increase in the number of people entering and obtaining licensure, but do we see a corresponding increase in complaints? Right? And if we do see an increase in entry, but not a significant change in percentage, there might be more numbers, but as a percentage of the overall population, then our fears would be unfounded.
So I'm wondering if that would be something that we could ask KPA to provide us with, if there's any information or any research that they have done that would speak to what Linda and what Ned are and what Sarah what we all are talking about. Would we like to ask KPA to due diligence in that regard?
I think KPA, promotes, the view that the postdoctoral supervision requirement, be eliminated. I mean, they might do some more work in that area, but I don't know that it's going to change their outlook on things. I think they're advocating, for a certain, group of folks, including, some trainees anyway, and psychologists. I'm thinking of from the standpoint, of protecting the public, which is what we're responsible for doing. The piece that I've heard that is protecting the public here, is, that we need more psychologists. And there's no question about that. I've said, there are things about it that do bother me. I don't know, in terms of taking the leadership, in terms of how we go forward, I'm not sure that I can do more than say I have concerns about it. I wish I had the time to gather more information. I really appreciate, Sarah, your willingness to look into some of these, into these questions. I just don't know what the outcome is going to be. I am reminded of the survey that we did do of the psychologists in the state, and there were quite a lot of comments about people being troubled with the decline in the experience of folks of the training that psychologists receive, and so that bothers me too.
One of the things,
Mark, please.
Go ahead, or you want me to speak?
Yeah, no, please go ahead. Yes.
Oh, okay. I think I said this last time. As I speak right now, over the last 6 to 12 months, I've had numerous people tell me they've been waiting again 6 months to a year or more to have a licensed psychologist get them in, for testing, psychological evaluations. Personally, here in Hutchinson, I've had people drive just in the last few weeks from Pittsburgh, Kansas, Fort Scott, Kansas, Chanute, Cherryvale, especially Southeast Kansas, mostly Parsons, because they can't find anybody that would be willing to test them. They would have to wait 6 months to a year again to be tested. There's such a shortage of us, and the problem's just been getting worse. And it's very frustrating for these people, and I feel bad. I see them drive 240 miles, literally sometimes one way, just for an appointment with me. So I try to get the evaluation done. I will get it done for them. They have to spend the night here and then drive back the next day sometimes. So it's a real, almost a crisis situation for some of these people. It's getting worse again the last year or so, 6 months to a year. And the wait period again, I've heard some people say up to 2 years, but definitely 6 months to a year to wait. So I just want to share that. Ned, I certainly express your concern. I think it's getting worse. I just want to share those thoughts again.
No, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. And I think that to your point, Ned, about the piece of this that has to do with the protection of the public, I think that part of what it is what you stated. I think another part of it can be about ensuring that there is appropriate and adequate training of those who are um, who want to become licensed as psychologists, making sure that the training is there so that there aren't concerns regarding unprofessional conduct, as an example, or other issues related to competency. So I think that is also a critical part of this, and I think that part of what you were saying speaks directly to that matter or to those. And I think that if with KPA being the entity that brought this to the advisory committee, I think that we could ask KPA if they have information about uh, concerns regarding uh, complaints and those sorts of things to provide to the committee so that we can further deliberate upon whether or not we want to make this recommendation. Uh, that's just one way of thinking about it, and I would be open to questions or thoughts, either pro or con what I've just offered. So I do think that KPA could be the entity that would do a bit of the research since they brought it to us.
You have a point.
So seeing what we have here, and I want to be mindful of everybody's time. I'm thinking, Leslie and David, that we may want to get more information regarding questions raised by what I think it was Ned and Linda, and comments from various others. And what I think I'd like to do is to take this offline so that the questions that were asked can be further elucidated. Folks can send their questions to Leslie and to David and to me. And that those questions in turn can be given to KPA. How do folks feel about that as a process?
I think that's a good idea.
I second
So
it. I agree too.
so let's do that. Let's for those who had specific questions, and I appreciate everybody's thoughtfulness on this because this is a really important issue. It has to do with the continuation of the work that we do here in Kansas as psychologists. Folks who have questions, please send them to me and to David and to Leslie, so that they can in turn be turned over to KPA. And if we can do that within the next few weeks, folks can sit down and really think about how they would want to, or what information they would want to receive in terms of statistics from KPA with respect to matters related to licensure. I think that would be a way to go. So if folks have a few weeks to do it, and then we can turn all those things over to KPA, that would be great. Any other matters on this point? Seeing none, Dave, I would like your advisement on the 4 remaining topics under old and new business. And of course, we want to recognize those who are departing the committee. So we've got about 5 minutes left. Do you have thoughts on which point we should go to next?
So I think I can knock out the artificial intelligence item real quick. I just want to provide a couple of updates on that item for members of the committee.
Okay.
And if we wanted to take maybe like 5 minutes, I can talk about a plan going forward for how we can analyze the data from the report. I realize it's a lot of information, and so I don't expect everyone to have read all 59 pages of the draft report. And so I do have a schedule of how we can look at these items in a way that we can have a productive conversation and sort of divide and conquer.
As you and I had talked about last week, yes.
Yeah. So I guess just if we go in order for the next two items, I'd asked individuals to review the draft report for the survey that we did for licensees, and there's so much good information in the document. We will clean this up a little bit more, but most of it will be substantially the same as what you received in the draft report. We'll provide some additional analysis, but the majority of that document really is the appendices with a lot of the open field answers that people provided. So feel free to continue to review that information. I realize there's a lot of really meaty topics and really weighty items on here, which is, all good for discussion, but to make sure that we limit which items we're looking at, but still progress forward. For the next meeting, if you could plan to look at question 12, which starts on page 8. It's the very bottom of page 8. Question 12 says, over the last 2 years, based on your observations and experience practicing in the psychology profession, could you share information on any practice-related negative issues you've seen, such as areas where practitioners appear to need more continuing education or training in a certain area? That will help us identify some of the concerns on a high level that people have seen either from their own experience or that they've heard from others. And then also, if you could plan to look at question 15, and that is the bottom of page 10. Question 15 says, over the last 2 years, have you experienced any negative issues involving supervision? If so, please explain. We've done a lot of work talking about supervision in the last couple of years. And so I think if we can limit the discussion at the next meeting to those 2 questions, feel free to review the brief summary information we included in the report, but also go back to the appendices and read what information licensees provided to those 2 questions. And then you can be prepared to talk about those in the next meeting.
Any questions about going forward with respect to the survey and questions that we would want to consider? I think that just a bit of editorializing, I think that this is a fantastic endeavor to kind of do a deeper dive into a couple of questions so that we can glean responses, if there are any themes, and how we might want to, if there are action items that we would want to take, how we would want to conceptualize those and go forward. So I appreciate everybody's participation in doing that. Dave, I'll have us go to 8C and a discussion on the regulation of artificial intelligence.
Okay, thank you, Richard. And just 2 updates for AI. One, at a state level, there's a group called the Information Network of Kansas. They assist state agencies with certain tools. They help us when we built the payment portal on our website. And so they hosted a forum about a week and a half ago, and we're talking about some conceptual ideas for future tools for state agencies. And one of the things they were briefly discussing was AI. And what they talked about was a little bit differently than what you may have heard about AI, but it was more about how do we take an existing resource that is good and make it better or more accessible. And so what they were talking about was potentially taking things like FAQ sections on agency websites and plugging that information into a simple chat bot, so that if individuals came to a licensing website, they'd be able to access information more quickly or potentially more easily if they had accessibility issues. And so these things have not been developed yet. I just want you to know what's being discussed on a state level, at least by certain vendors. And then at a national level, I definitely am not an expert on this topic, but I'm trying to keep an eye on news at a national level. And I have heard that there is federal legislation, the appropriations bill that was passed by the House, that included a provision that if this was enacted, it would prohibit states from regulating artificial intelligence for 10 years. And so it still has to pass the Senate and be signed into law without it being removed. So there's still some work that would need to be done for this actually to get put into law. But I want you to know that potentially if that were to pass, it would conflict with our discussions right now in terms of offering ways the board can regulate artificial intelligence. I think we need to monitor this in terms of what's happening at the federal level, but I don't think it means we need to stop having our conversations, or that we need to not be prepared to move forward recommendations to the board. But I want you to know that that is a conversation I've heard at the federal level, and I'll keep you updated on that as I hear news about it. But in terms of just from what I've heard, it is pretty broad. And so if it is passed, that would limit our ability to regulate artificial intelligence for a certain number of years. But we're still a ways away from that being enacted. So I just want to keep you updated about that item.
Any thoughts or questions about what Dave has just presented to us about artificial intelligence and its regulation in our field? So David and I have, we meet before this meeting, and he had discussed this with me. And I will go on the record in saying that I would be quite concerned if it is indeed the case. So with respect to the second point, I'd be quite concerned if it is indeed the case that there would be a broader prohibition on our ability to regulate artificial intelligence in our rules and regulations, in our statutes and regulations. We could still do, maybe we could do some things with regulations, but certainly in statute, we could not be able to do the things that we may think are important in that regard. I think it's really important for us to be able to engage in thoughtful discussions about artificial intelligence, and if need be, request changes in statute so that we can protect the public. So I just wanted to go on record in stating that I am concerned if it is a broad prohibition, if the law is enacted, that could be, I think that's serious.
I would agree, Richard, because I think then it clashes also with the HIPAA Privacy Act, because, one of the main concerns with particularly poor use or ignorant use of AI tools could be that they come from electronic medical record you're using or some kind of system that doesn't have appropriate safeguards. And we just modified our training policy regarding AI to really address that. And I would agree with you completely. If we don't have that ability to do so, we're going to be conflicting with all sorts of laws and ethical practices as well. So,
and you make a really good point about HIPAA. I hadn't even thought about how this could run up against and clash with matters related to HIPAA. That's a really good point.
There was something else I saw that I thought was interesting, and that was out of Illinois. I believe they passed some law. I don't know if anyone else is familiar with this one, but you can't call yourself a therapist if only humans can call themselves therapists or did anyone else see that? So I saw that on Ben Locke posted that. He was a psychologist at a lot of counseling centers back. Now he works for a telehealth company, but yeah.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. So there has been some proactive measures taken, it sounds like, at least in one state, to indicate that AI is not a therapist, or a bot is not a therapist. That's fascinating. Any other thoughts regarding what Davis presented to us regarding regulating artificial intelligence? Seeing none, I'll move us along to new business. We've covered A, and we've got B and C, and I'll have you choose whichever one you want to go first with, Dave.
All right, thanks, Richard. C might be a little faster to talk about, so I'll do C real quick. So we have talked in the past about Kansas does not require a jurisprudence exam for licensure. And there has been some conversation at times about, should the board try to have a new requirement of a jurisprudence examination, as some states do. We've explored that. The models that are in place Some of them, the board creates that and administers that exam themselves. Some, they outsource it. If they outsource it, that company collects that fee for providing the exam. For the other boards that do it, they put in the money to build it and then administer it, and then I believe they charge a fee for that. We really didn't want to have our licensees have any additional fees unless it was absolutely necessary. And while we do value the importance of the material that would be covered in a jurisprudence exam, at this point, when we're having so many conversations about workforce, it would be challenging to add requirements to licensure. And so we wrestled with how can we accomplish the mission of the board on this topic. And so our proposal was to think outside the box and come up with a solution that would involve doing what you'd find in a jurisprudence exam, but in the format of a webinar, and making it optional, but incentivize it with a free hour of continuing education and possibly make it fun, and hope that that experience would be beneficial, but also something that people would appreciate and enjoy. And we've had a lot of really positive support for it conceptually, from licensees, from members of the public, from students who wish to sit in on these as well. And so we are to the point now to where we're starting to get close to building this. And so I've talked with our investigators, I've talked with our licensing staff. We've identified, I think, the main concepts we want to at least start to test on, so to speak. But what we would like to do is get 1 or 2 volunteers from each of the advisory committees that I could meet with just on a volunteer basis, maybe 30 minutes to an hour once a month for a few months, to work on some language around these concepts, to build some questions. And so that's kind of what I'm bringing to the advisory committees this month, and just kind of saying, I think we're close to being able to put this together. If there's any advisory committee members that would be interested in volunteering to be part of this process, I really just need maybe a couple individuals to volunteer outside of meetings, but I think it would be helpful. I can bring these concepts, work with you, but I think you've seen the language for your licensees as far as your colleagues, and what would be helpful in terms of phrasings and different things like that. That's really, the perspective that I'm looking for. So if anybody would like to volunteer tonight, feel free to let me know at the meeting. If you want to think about it and send an email to me at some point after the meeting, that is fine too. But I wanted to bring it to you and just kind of let you know, I'm just looking for a couple volunteers to help out outside of the meeting. And then hopefully we can get this launched in the next couple months.
Anyone have any questions or would like to volunteer for engaging in this process? Anybody questions or
I would like to volunteer.
Thank you, Mark.
I'd like to volunteer too, David.
Okay.
I think Tiffany raised her hand. No?
I raised my hand, but you got there first,
Oh.
so.
Oh, no. Well, I have another subcommittee or advisory committee that I could volunteer in.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll reach out to Mark and Tiffany. If would you say that you'd be up for helping out with this a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, Linda, since you're involved with both of the different advisory committees, I'll go ahead and how about if I work with Mark and Tiffany, and then I might pull you in when we start to review some of the additional language as well. How's that sound?
Good.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you for both for volunteering, and I'm excited about this. I think nobody else is doing this kind of approach, so it is outside the box, and it's a little bit unique. But I'm really hoping that we get the uptake that we want, just from incentivizing it versus making a requirement, not charging a fee for it, but offering the continuing education. So I'm really hoping that it'll be a good experience and people will benefit from it.
You should present that I think we get it done and we present it at ASPPB.
Yeah, I think
right. I think people would be interested.
Yeah, this model I think has a lot of potential. And we've had some questions too. Will it be the same set of questions if we offer it quarterly That's not what I intend to do. My hope is that we can identify concepts for the first webinars, and then we can mix it up in future ones. So there would be a nice motivation for people to potentially attend them all if they want to. But as the schedule allows, if they're only able to attend one, at least they would benefit from going over those topics.
Any further thoughts or questions? Last item on the agenda, a discussion on alternative pathways for licensure or to licensure.
Yeah, and this came from the board. The chair of the board asked the board to have a conversation about alternative pathways to licensure as an alternative to specifically talking about licensing examinations for the different professions. And so this is something that is not a short conversation, but the chair of the board wanted the board to have a conversation about this. And the thought was is that each of the advisory committees, we wanted to defer this to the advisory committees to get feedback and comments from all of you. There are strong feelings and strong positions on all sides of this topic. And I know for the psychology profession, the conversation has included this, but it's also been in other ways talking about the EPPP and the EPPP2. So there's been a conversation about should there be a second test. And so I do think the advisory committee should never be afraid to have a conversation about a difficult issue, but I do want you to know we will be collecting information to help you in this conversation to kind of see what other states are requiring so that you can have some comparison. But I want to make sure that you have good resources as you consider this topic. And so just kind of wanted to frame this so you could think about it in preparation for the next meeting, knowing that it'll be a conversation that'll probably be ongoing as we talk about the different elements involved with this discussion.
Thank you, Dave. No, really appreciate it. And I look forward to having a continued discussion with the advisory committee about matters related to licensure and how we get there. Any questions for David regarding this matter? Well, seeing none, the last item on our agenda is to recognize those who are departing the Licensed Psychology Advisory Committee because they have completed 4 terms and they now need to rotate off per statute. And those 2 individuals, neither of whom are here today, unfortunately, are Abby Callis and Doug Wright. So Dave, I'll have you go ahead.
Thanks, Richard. And Abby, unfortunately, was only able to attend the beginning of the meeting, but she did send an email to me after she had to log out. And she did say that she very much appreciated her time on the advisory committee, and she wanted to wish everyone good luck moving forward over the next few years. And definitely have enjoyed working with Abby. She's been a very good advisory committee member, and to have served 4 terms on the advisory committee, I mean, that's 8 years of service, and that's quite a lot of time to have volunteered, and it's a very worthy conversation, and we really do appreciate the work that all of you do. And so wanted to really say thank you to Abby for all of her work. And similarly, Doug has been on the advisory committee for 4 terms as well. So he is reaching the maximum length of service. So Doug Wright is also coming off the advisory committee. His term officially ends at the end of June. We usually go on the state fiscal years that start July 1st. And so he also has really appreciated his time on the advisory committee. Wanted to thank all the members of the committee, and on behalf of the advisory committee, really wanted to thank Doug as well. I've enjoyed his thoughtful comments at our meetings and working with him, and hope that we will all get the opportunity to work with Abby and Doug in another forum sometime in the future. But part of the reason why we have limitations on how long people can serve is that we have new voices and new members join the advisory committee, and it helps keep the conversation fresh. So I want to thank both of them, but are also looking forward to the 2 new members coming onto the committee starting in August.
I just want to echo the same sentiments in terms of having worked with Abby and Doug briefly as a member of the committee. I really appreciate their insights and what they've contributed to our discussions. And I also look forward to Jennifer and to Robert joining the committee and getting their perspectives on related to regulation and protecting the public. And like, I also want to echo the sentiment of enjoying in terms of working with all of you who remain on the committee. You devote a lot of time and effort to this endeavor, and the field here in Kansas is and the public here in Kansas are better off for it, for your participation. So thank you all. I appreciate it. And I think that leads us to the end of the meeting. Our next meeting, we are back. We're back on track this meeting. Our next meeting will be 2 months from now, and that'll be the second Tuesday of August, which reads as the 12th of August, 2025 at 6 p.m. So, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Yes.
Mark moves. I think that's, and I've heard a couple say, I think, and I don't think that we necessarily need to vote on that. So I will see you all in a couple of months. You all have a good rest of your Tuesday night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.